USCHO.com.
Welcome to USCHO Edge for Friday, February 9th, 2024. I'm Ed Trefzger alongside Jim Connelly and Dan Rubin. This podcast is sponsored by the NCAA Men's Division I Frozen Four, April 11th and 13th at XL Energy Center in St. Paul, Minnesota. Visit ncaa.com/mfrozen4 to get your tickets today. Well, Jim, before we get into this week's games, you wanted to set something straight about betting on the Beanpot.
Yeah, I wrote in my column last Friday, that I wasn't sure that we'd even see odds on the Beanpot because I didn't believe that Boston-based fans that use the online mobile apps or even go to the casinos could bet because they were Boston-based games, Massachusetts-based teams. And there is a restriction that you're not supposed to be able to bet on anything except postseason tournaments. Well, the Beanpot does not seem like a postseason tournament to me, but that was legalized, and DraftKings had lines on it last week. So happy to see that. I actually don't think that something like the Beanpot should be precluded from wagering. So I'm glad to see that. Now we'll probably see most of the postseason tournaments get there too. I wish the one thing I know, and I know we've done shows on the season futures. I don't understand why, if you're in New York, you can't bet on the New York teams. If you're in Massachusetts, you can't bet on the Massachusetts teams in those season futures on who's going to win the national championship. I digress a little bit on that, but I am glad to see that the Beanpot was on there. So that's a big step forward.
I guess they were listening to Jerry York. It is the beginning of trophy season.
That makes sense, I guess. Yes.
Well, speaking of Hockey East and Eastern teams, we have 5 games as usual. 2 of them are in Hockey East. We have a couple from the Big Ten, and there are only lines on one game in the NCHC. And we'll get the Western teams in the second part of the program, but we're going to start out with New Hampshire at Boston College. UNH is a plus 230, BC's a minus 315, and the over-under on this one is 6.
And I think BC is playing very well right now. New Hampshire has had its stumbles. If you like BC, there's no value there. You have to hammer this one. You probably have to, if you want to make $100, you're talking about laying $315. That's not a worthy bet in my opinion. But if you see any value on New Hampshire here, and this is a team that has already beat Quinnipiac, already beat Boston University. They've had some quality wins throughout their season. They do some really good things. They're going to be a tough team to play. They took BU. They basically outplayed BU on the road a few weeks ago and lost the game. This is a New Hampshire team that could win it, plus 230. Great value. I still don't like it. In the over-under of 6, I hate the number because it feels perfectly set. I feel like this is a 4-2 game. I would only bet the over here. I would not touch the under. I don't think this thing stays 3-1 or 3-2. This thing's going to go higher than that. So I guess if you're asking me to where to bet this one, I'd say take the over. And if you really feel good about New Hampshire, maybe take the over plus UNH.
I think I'd probably feel better about the value on UNH if this were in Durham at the WIT. Unfortunately, it's not. It's at BC, and in between Beanpot at Connie Forum, it could be tough to win. I mean, just based on the atmosphere and going on the road, and I think that kind of tilts things. Plus, even as I'm looking at the schedule, it's Top Gun night at BC, so I mean, you got to throw I don't know what that means, but we'll throw some added pizza money in there or something. I don't know. But
Top Gun night.
You get your aviators, right?
Is Tom Cruise going to be there himself?
Oh, too close to missiles. I'm switching the guns. The thing that I kind of come back to for BC on this is that, like I said about the Lowell game, which is I think there's a pathway for UNH to win this game. Do I think UNH is actually going to win? No. I think that's the same thing I said when they were at Lowell with BC. I didn't think Lowell was going to win that game. But what I see is that this is a tricky slope. This is a little bit more slippery for BC than it looks, which is, yes, you're playing at home, but you're coming off a loss, a hard-fought loss You have to turn around on Monday and play Harvard in the Beanpot, which hypothetically sounds better than it is, but it's, because it's the Beanpot and all this. But Harvard played well against Northeastern, and I think, if they're picking up steam, that could be a trap game. So I think there is value. I don't think this is hitting the under. It's not hitting the under. BC on an over-under of 6. The only time I think they've hit the under of a 6 lately is when they played BU, and UNH is not BU. So
and only once out of those 3 games.
Yeah.
It was a 4-1 game.
Right. And so I don't know that I'd take the under on this. I do think if you like UNH, go for it. My buyer beware on UNH is that their wins over Quinnipiac, their wins over BU all happened at the beginning of the season. They don't have that marquee type win really since UConn doesn't move the needle as much as I want it to. Merrimack doesn't move the needle. Vermont doesn't move the needle. Neither does Princeton. Neither does Sacred Heart, and they lost to Army. So I think this is a team that is in the hunt for a national tournament because of its wins at the beginning of the season, and probably needs 1 or 2 more, but I just don't see it getting there right now.
How about BC's mindset coming into this? I mean, you lose in the Beanpot to your arch rival in a game that, from my watching on TV, really felt like BC outplayed BU in, like second period on. It really felt more like that if they had a couple more minutes, they might have tied that thing. How does BC come into this game? Do they come in really hungry and angry?
I hope so. I would hope so. I'm sure Greg Brown, as their head coach, feels that same way, that they need to be more aggressive than they've probably ever been this season. You need to be pissed when you lose that game on the big stage to an arch rival, a team that you just beat, 8, 9, 10 days ago. It's not embarrassing to lose it. The fact that they, turned over the puck so much in that game, and those turnovers resulted in goals, I think that's what's probably more embarrassing for them, because I think they've taken a little bit of pride in their defense. Listen, they have plenty of offense, but to win championships, you have to have good defense too. And I think they were developing that until maybe, first period of Monday night. I'm not going to say much. So that's Macklin Celebrini, but those 2 goals, and one in the second, one in the third for BU, they were turnover goals. Great goals for BU, but they're turnovers for BC. And that's something that I think Greg Brown was trying to erase as much as he could from his repertoire, his team's repertoire. And so I hope they come out hungry. That's what makes me want to bet them. I will tell you, we never talk puck line on the show. Puck line means you have to win the game by 2 goals or more if you're talking about the favorite. And BC on the puck line right now is -130. So if you're trying to say that they're going to win the game and just bet the money line, you're talking about wagering $3.15 to win 100. If you're going to say that they're going to win by 2 goals or more, that's a little stretch, but it's not that much of a stretch. It's 1 extra goal. Then you're talking -130. That's a more manageable bet for a lot of gamblers.
What's funny, just to throw in there about BC, is that out of all the games numerically and mathematically, the game that they'd want to lose to BU, if you were going to go 2-1 towards their national championship hopes, probably would have been the Beanpot.
Sure.
But it's the Beanpot, so emotionally, it's the one that nobody wants to lose.
Right. It's the emotionally fragile game, but it's also the one that doesn't hurt you in the hockey standings.
The other game in the East we're going to look at is Providence at Maine. Providence a +120. Maine favored at home a -150. 5.5's the over-under on this one.
What a great matchup this is going to be. Maine is still playing well. They had a little hiccup last Friday. I called that game, and they had a 2-1 lead, gave up the tying goal, then took a major penalty and gave up 3 to Northeastern, Northeastern's power play is dynamic. And they struck quick. And when those moments happen, they really do hurt as a Maine team. I sit there and think at home, Maine, and -150 is a good price for them. Providence has surprised me a couple of times this season, but not enough. Maine has shown shown out really well. And if you want to go to the puck line, Maine by 2 goals, so -1.5, you can get the +170 in there. I don't know that they're going to blow away Providence, but I feel like they're going to win, and at least win with some confidence. 4-2, 5-3. I don't want the over/under 5.5. I'm not touching that number. Perfect number. But I like Maine. I certainly like them on the money line of -150. I love them on the puck line of +170.
I don't really know what to make of this because just straight on the numbers, Providence is not particularly great on the road, and Maine hasn't lost at home. So I don't know. So straight off the numbers, I'd say Providence is not winning this game. And I'd honestly look at the puck line because of the value you can get on Maine at home. I think there's at this point of the season, the puck line is something I'd be willing to discuss more and more. I think I actually mentioned it with the Lowell game last week. I also think that Providence is both better and worse at times than their record indicates. I think when you look at them in the pairwise, they're a team that is just as good as the next tier. I mean, BCBU and Maine right now are 3 of the 5 best teams in the country analytically. And statistically, analytically, within the pairwise, outside the pairwise, they're a top for a reason, and I think they're able to pull the rest of Hockey East with them. So when I look at Providence and I look at the resume, I don't see a team that's at that level. But at the same time, if you think that Providence could be at that level, this would be the team that I think that would be a little bit more ripe for the picking because they had that loss to Northeastern, because they had that loss to UConn, and they only beat UMass 1-0 last week. So I do think there is something to be said for Providence in this game. I don't know if I feel confident picking them, especially there at Alphon, but I also, there's something about this that just feels kind of sticky for Maine as a matchup on Friday. I don't think they're losing on Saturday.
I'm not sticky on this one. I think Maine is so good at home. They're fantastic at home. I love Maine there.
So it's so great to have that building back to the way like that. Just as an aside,
whatever it is, 5,600 or so. When that place is packed, it is so hard to play.
The Maniacs.
Let's take a pause. When we come back, we'll talk about a key NCHC game and 2 in the Big Ten. This podcast is sponsored by the NCAA Men's Division I Frozen Four, April 11th and 13th at XL Energy Center in St. Paul, Minnesota.
Where are my hockey fans at? Present! Welcome to Fandom 101. It's NCAA Ice Hockey Championship time, when the hottest teams in the country face off under one roof. Be there to see your squad hoist the ultimate trophy overhead. The NCAA Men's Frozen Four, April 11th and 13th in St. Paul, Minnesota. Attendance is encouraged. Passion is mandatory. Buy your seats today at ncaa.com/mfrozen4. Class dismissed.
We're back with USCHO Edge. Let's go to the NCHC. Now, this game has huge implications for both teams. Omaha is 4 points behind Western Michigan. Western Michigan is 1 point behind DU for home ice in the playoffs. Omaha comes into this weekend having gotten their first home sweep, their first sweep of the season, and Western Michigan split at Denver, but won on the second night, a whopping 7-2. So both teams have momentum. Numbers on this one: Omaha is +175. The home Western Michigan Broncos -230. Over under is 6.
I don't like to say that I like Omaha here, but I like Omaha here. I'm not taking anything away from Western and Pat Ferschweiler. I mean, I think their team showed last Saturday night that they can take advantage of great situations. I think they found Denver at a vulnerable moment for some reason, and DU really struggled in that game, and Western's offense cranked. But I say that, and I don't like the consistency really of either team. But Omaha, coming off a couple, they needed a sweep. They got it. And now they're going on the road and they're a +175. You talk about value. That's about as much value as you can get for a team that I actually believe could win this week. So that's probably my favorite underdog pick of the week would be Omaha. The over-under of 6, don't love it. Don't love that one. But I do like Omaha here for some reason.
I'm with you. And I think there's some production that gives you the point on why Omaha could pull off a win, especially on Friday. They took 4 points from St. Cloud on the road. They beat North Dakota on the road on Friday. They beat Minnesota Duluth on the road, but that was the Saturday game. And they've beaten Denver on the road, which was also the Saturday game. So they are a very good weekend road team. They're not a team that's going to blow you away or necessarily finish, well over 500. I think they're coming into this with a 6-4 record on the road, but 6-4-1 rather. But they're a team that is good on the road, not great, good. And I think that Western is, when you're seeing the value and you're seeing the bet, again, it's not about necessarily who I personally think I would want to see win this game. It's who I think has good value to win this game. I think there's a lot of value on Omaha. I'm not touching that over under. Omaha last week, speaking specifically for them, 6 goals against Duluth, 7 goals against Duluth. Before that, you had a 2-goal game against St. Cloud and a 13-goal game against St. Cloud. Yeah. I am not going anywhere near an over under a 6.
And don't forget Western last week, plenty of goals scored.
Yeah. Yes.
9 on the second night, 7 for Western themselves. So I get very nervous at that 6. If you want to bet something there, take the over. It's actually shaded to a little less money for the over. It's only -105 to bet the over on DraftKings. I'd say that's probably where the value is, but there's no value in over under there.
And just remember too, Western was at home against Colorado College and lost both those games in overtime. Western was at home against Duluth and lost the Friday game at home. So Western is not invincible at home.
Let's turn to the Big Ten. And speaking of home games, both of these teams won in each other's barn earlier this season. It's Michigan State at Michigan. The Spartans are a +105. The Wolverines -135. And the over-under on this one might even still be low at 7.5.
If it was 8, I was all over it. 7.5. And I'm not even joking when I say that if it was 8, at least I feel like there's some pushes that are possible. There's no real true push here. That's the real struggle. This will be the one game that is of the weekend that is played in a home building. This is going to be at Ann Arbor on Friday. I love the way that Michigan found a way to win both games last week. I love the way they closed out the Saturday game. We talked about this on USCHO Weekend Review. I'm high on Michigan right now. Should I be low on Michigan State? No. But just the fact this game's in Ann Arbor, over under 7.5. Oof. It shades a tiny bit toward the under, but I mean, I think that let's go back to what these two teams did recently, a 7-1 and a 7-5. So you're talking about neither game went under 7.5. That's why I really wanted this game at 8. 8 would have made me say, oh, I want to take the over just so I could push on a 6-4. I'm sorry, a 5-3 or a 7-1 or a 6-2. Then we at least push. But that 7.5, you just for the heck of it, you go under by 1. Oh, that's tough. I don't know. I still like the over. Can I say I like the over in this one? I shouldn't, but every game has said go over. But I like Michigan. I do like Michigan in this game.
The heck with it. I pound the over. Why not? I'm right? You know what? Why not? I'm not even doing the pizza money. This is one of those when I was at a casino once, one of my buddies on a craps table decided that he was going to throw the chip down for a hard 8 and just literally threw it up in the air. And he was like, hard 8. And then next time it won. So throw the chip in the air. You know what? The heck with it. Take the over. I actually do remember a couple weeks ago, I think I said Michigan. It's not a knock against them. I don't think there's negatives. The negative is that there haven't been enough positives. And then they went out and did what they've done against Michigan State, Wisconsin, Ohio State. Yeah, they have positives now, and that's why I like them, because they're there.
Positives. They have positives when they don't collapse.
Yeah, but you'll know early. Like
their Saturday nights are awful. We're only talking about Friday night. Their Friday nights are awesome. Yeah. Like everything is Friday. Well, that's all they should be saying there.
I will say this would be a game that in the first 7 or 8 minutes of the first period, I might actually say, like, if you're thinking about it, maybe check in after the first few minutes and see if you can live bet the money line along the way, because you'll know quickly if Michigan is going to play like Michigan or if they're not going to play like Michigan.
They've only laid a few eggs on Friday, and they have. Don't get me wrong. Minnesota 4-3 loss. That's not an egg. What's the other one I said? Notre Dame. Notre Dame's the biggest Friday egg they laid. A 6-1 loss in South Bend. That's the only really horrible Friday game they've played this year.
I mean, we could say Providence, but that was the first game of the year.
I'm not counting that.
I'm not counting that.
The last one on our list today is Notre Dame at Wisconsin. They sold out the Kohl Center for the first time in ages against Minnesota last weekend. Wisconsin's minus 230 at home. Notre Dame a plus 175. And the over-under on this one is 5. And I'm going to throw out a couple of numbers here as we talk about over and under. Wisconsin has the number 1 defense in the country at 1.86 goals per game. Notre Dame is 16th at 2.57. Meanwhile, Wisconsin has the number 14 offense at 3.39, and Notre Dame is the number 35 offense at 2.89. So these are teams that don't give up a lot of goals, and especially in the case of Notre Dame, don't score a whole lot.
Well, I just want to go back to January 6th, 2024, Wisconsin at Notre Dame, a 7-4 decision. In favor of Wisconsin. So you look at that 5. And listen, the night before, a 2-1 win for Wisconsin. Both of these teams can play either style. I think Wisconsin prevails in either style no matter what. So I don't really worry about Wisconsin. You want to bet something here, minus 230 at home. Wonderful. Take that. Not great value. I get it. I wouldn't bet Notre Dame here if you forced me to. And that's no offense to Jeff Jackson, his club. Jeff's a great guy. He's a great coach. Wisconsin's unreal. And they handled them, I won't say mightily, but, 2-1, 7-4. I know there's probably I didn't really look at the box score. There's probably some bogus goals at the end of that thing. I'm sure there was a close game. But the over-under, go over. Just go over. Anytime you see 5 in college hockey, just go over. The odds are 70% of the time you're going to win. And then, take 70% of the time you're going to either push or win. How's that? You're only going to lose that probably 30% of the time. 5 goals in college hockey. You're not going to, as soon as we get to March, mid-March, erase everything I'm saying right now. But in the regular season, anytime you see a 5, pump the over.
Yeah, you're not going to see many weekends like last week with Minnesota, 2-1, 1-1. It's just not, that's not going to happen. And I will say the only thing I don't understand in this is why Notre Dame has, I don't know if it's worse odds, better odds. They're plus 175 and New Hampshire was plus 230. And I would argue that Wisconsin is actually more likely to beat Notre Dame than Boston College is to beat New Hampshire, right? In my mind, because Notre Dame is not good on the road. They're actually pretty bad on the road. 2-8 on the season. Wisconsin is 8-4 at home. I like the Kohl Center as when it's packed and when they're putting people in the building. This is not a game that I think you walk into, and when you look at the situation and you look at what has happened. I mean, granted, Notre Dame's caught a bit of a heater in January. They won 4 in a row, but I don't see it happening. I just don't see it happening. And so for me, I would have preferred Notre Dame. If the way I see value on Notre Dame is to push this thing to plus 200 or even plus 210 on Notre Dame, and then I see the value. I don't see them at plus 175 though.
I would have been in the plus 250s to need to bet Notre Dame here, and that's not an exaggeration. I know you're trying to be kind and just pump this up a little bit. No, I really thought that Wisconsin should have been in the 300s here, minus 300, 320, something like that.
Especially at home.
Two quick questions on this before we wrap up. Is this another case of the notoriety of Notre Dame getting a little bit more money in on them? Possibly? No,
not at this point. I think the bookmakers have seen plenty of weekends at this point. And maybe there's a little bit. I just don't think there's that much coming in that it should sway the line. No. So I say no. I could be wrong about that. And somebody at a book could call me and say, no, you're absolutely wrong. But at this point, you should know.
Second question has to do with the puck line. We normally don't talk about that much. Minus 145 for Notre Dame and plus 114 for Wisconsin. Do those close numbers suggest they are looking at it more likely being a 1-goal game?
Probably, yes. I mean, that's the way the bookmakers want to see it. Because then they make the delta. Especially if you bet Wisconsin to win by 2, that's plus 114. They take a lot of money if that happens. But I wouldn't even mind betting Wisconsin minus 1.5 that they have to win by 2. Plus 114, not bad. It's better than minus 230. Listen, these bookmakers know what they're doing. They set the lines absolutely perfectly. I will tell you, and I watched the great 60 Minutes episode. If anybody didn't see it on sports betting this past Sunday, find it on your DVR or on demand or something. They did a great job of explaining how AI is, really impacting this stuff. A lot of stuff is being done by AI and not by actual live eyes that are watching games. Back in the day, you didn't have college hockey odds because people needed to watch it. Now you just let a computer run all the numbers and figure out who should win. Unfortunately, though, they're getting more accurate. As the season goes on, the more data the computer has, the more accurate they seem to be getting. It's harder to find those edges.
Yeah, when we were talking about this stuff in October, everything was kind of conservative on over-under, and it didn't seem like they really had a good feel for it. Whether it's a human or AI, you need the data. And I got to think college year to year is a lot more difficult than, say, the National Hockey League.
Tons. National Hockey League, even if you have players traded and moved, you can still follow their progression, put them in different numbers and run the data sets again. College, you don't understand how much a player might improve year to year. You don't understand the off-season workouts, weight gain, how much that affects certain players, how much that changes a lineup and a roster and their ability, and just age, getting older. The transfer portal has not helped. It is not as plug and play as a quick trade in the NHL when you're trying to do the data models for college hockey. So I think it's a little bit more difficult earlier in the season. We're not seeing the numbers get screwed up as much as we did. We had some in December that, I can't remember. I think CC went somewhere and I said, they're a great bet at plus 315. Of course they were. CC, we know, is a good team. They ended up winning that game. That would have been a fantastic bet if you could make it. Like, you don't have those as much this time of year.
Yeah, and to that last point, that first point rather, about the recognition, I think that only is a factor earlier in the season when bettors are looking at it and saying, and again, you need a good amount of action to try and change the line out. And I think when you look at people who watch college hockey or people who follow a particular team, when you're at the beginning of the year, you still believe your team is very, very good. Or on the flip side, you're not sure, so you're not going to bet on your team or bet according to certain lines. So in that beginning part of the year, a team like Notre Dame, who has historically been pretty good, or a team like Wisconsin, who had historically been falling off but still carried name recognition, probably gets a benefit of the doubt that doesn't exist later in the year when there's more data points and data sets that they can input into the AI. I think beginning of the year, teams, you're just going to see lines skew heavily towards teams that, quote, should be good at the beginning of the year. And it's not until the middle of the year or the end of the year that we start to see, this team is this team. It's devoid of this team should be good or shouldn't be good.
Yeah, I agree with that.
Well, we'll wrap it there. This podcast is sponsored by the NCAA Men's Division I Frozen Four, April 11th and 13th at XL Energy Center in St. Paul, Minnesota. Visit ncaa.com/mfrozen4 to get your seats. For Jim Connelly, for Dan Rubin, I'm Ed Trefzger, and this has been USCHO Edge.